All right. Uh, Hello. I'm Noah. Let's talk a bit about technology. And so I'm just going to get straight into it. And the title of the thesis is Ambient Computationally Intelligent Technology Personified through Smart Assistants. And so it's a bit of a mouthful, and there's a lot to explain. So I've broken it up into two parts. So the first part is Ambient Computationally Intelligent Technology. I've dubbed it AKIT just for short. And basically, it's built upon the pillars of what is called ambient intelligence, which is basically these computational devices following these rules, which is they're embedded, they're contextually aware, personalized, adaptive, and anticipatory for the user. And so the thesis of AKIT, or Ambient Computationally Intelligent Technology, basically poses the question, what happens when technology recedes into the ambience of our lives? And so the metaphor that I make for that is, the metaphor of the wheel. When the wheel was invented, it's this huge thing. It changed how we live forever. And now to us, it's just a wheel. Sort of a simplification, but that's where it comes from. And then so we see this idea being purveyed a lot in media. So you have films, for example, like Spike Jonze's Her from 2013, talking about like our human relationship with an artificial intelligence. But not only do we see it in media, we see it a lot in the contemporary space as well. So Google obviously being like a fantastic example of this. They themselves at the most recent hardware launch event stated the word ambient computing, which was kind of awesome because it was like 2 weeks after I'd started my thesis on this idea. So they're just starting to now really disseminate this idea. And so last semester I spent some time exploring, what is AKIT, and all these in a speculative sense. How far can it go? What does it mean? Explored ideas of privacy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so after doing all that, I figured, okay, it's time to go back. It's time to go back a little bit and look at sort of an overview. And so after doing that, I had identified back in the contemporary space, where does AKIT live? And I'd identified smart assistants as that place. And so you see this ambient intelligence, this embedded Internet of Things that talks to each other, and it's contextual. But the vessel for it in the contemporary space is our smart assistants, right? Is our Siris, our Bixbys, our Google Assistants, our Alexas. So we have, a sense of this Internet of Things, this interconnectedness, but we start to see this personification of it through smart assistants. And as you can see, they live mostly on the mobile phone. I mean, you have Google Home and Amazon Alexa, but they're mostly pervasive throughout mobile operating systems. So if we take a look at the mobile operating system, right, we can see how it's laid out, and we can see that the assistant at its core is not within a system level functionality of the mobile operating system. And so after identifying this, I sort of marked a turning point in the thesis. And so this is when we can start talking about how it's personified through smart assistants, right? And so I analyzed the information architecture specifically on Android, just from a very high level, as to see where does the assistant fit on this and what actions does it sort of take. And so the assistant sits very much at an application level. I mean, yes, it's embedded in the operating system, but it functions on an application level, and it doesn't have the same priority as something like your notification or your system navigation, right? And so if we were to build a mobile operating system with the assistant embedded from the start, where would the assistant sit? And so I took a look at that. I look at that, and I tried to really simplify this and streamline it and see how the assistant can fit into this to enhance this ambient computationally intelligent technology. And then from that, I started building, more ideas, more flowcharts, thinking about how does it handle user customization, right? In terms of like an Apple and Android spectrum, they're very much on the opposite side. So where does this sit? And as you'll see, usually sits somewhere in the middle, combining a little bit of both. And in the same sense, the visual design hierarchy, taking the best from each approach and creating a system in which it controls a lot, but allows for customization so it can feel personalized and contextual. Once again, relating back to the thesis idea in question. So then, after doing all of this research and flowcharts, it's time to simplify a little bit and really start to create a brand around this idea. And so I came up with the brand Osmosis OS, sort of putting it all into a nice little package. And the name comes from one of the big influences on the thesis itself, which is once again Her by Spike Jonze. In this pivotal scene, our main character and our artificial intelligence are having a fight, and she makes these breathing sounds, and he asks why, like, why are you doing that? I thought that was really poignant, that sort of personification of the assistant, making it more human. And so taking that idea of like humanizing an assistant and using it as a metaphorical sphere around the design system, right? So we're not actually humanizing it, but we're adding this sort of organic motion and sort of soft color palette that makes it feel more organic without necessarily, giving it a name or a face, right? And then so I went a little farther with this, and I explored, what does this thing look like? How do we make it calming? How do we make it not, feel invasive to the user? And so I had come up with this idea of using, 3D abstract organic forms along with kinetic typography, using variable typefaces, and I thought it really looked good. But then, it's like, okay, hold on. So we have this idea of how it looks, but how does this system actually function? That's the core of it, right? The core of the thesis is this embedded, contextually aware thing that does things for us and helps our lives so we have more time to do other things. And so once again, I went back and I looked, how did Her do it? How did they do it in terms of making an actual interface? And so I really like this idea of this depth, right? It adds this, it takes you out of the screen in a sense. It creates this extra dimension. But I didn't really like how they did it in the movie in terms of the actual system. They don't define it that much, but what you can gather from the image. And so I created this system in which your applications or in-app actions lie on your in the depth. So you have your most pertinent things first, then your customizable things behind it, and then granular things farther behind. And so I looked at different ways I can sort of show this idea, and I actually created a quick 3D render just to see how I wanted to show the depths. Because if you look in the screen, you could see they're using these sort of faux drop shadows and scale. And I decided to go with atmospheric perspective, once again tying back into the organic visual design that I was trying to go for. And so now for a quick demo, just to show how I create a quick showcase of how I imagine it to work. You have this interface in which you can scroll around and see everything is in 3D space, right? And so you can move throughout the 3D space using this dot, which I will talk about in a second, by going in, and you can go to the next level and start interacting with things on that level. And you can always go back out to the previous level. Opening apps, right? It comes and it sort of takes over the screen, but you still want to have this idea of depth, and you're still in this sort of dimension, this alternate dimension within your phone in a way. And so you can always hook out of it. That'll come in later. Hook out of it and continue with what you're doing. And then, of course, the idea of the thesis, having the assistant be able to, mess with this interface, with this dimension for you, so you don't have to go through all of this stuff. You can always get the assistant to do certain things for you. And in this case, like cleaning up a few things and reorganizing things in your space, right? And so that's what I had come up with. I had initially done sort of these 3D, actually doing it in 3D and figuring out how it worked. And I created that interactive prototype in a separate software so you could actually see how it works. And basically what I defined from this, one of the biggest things was this idea of hooking, right? So that sort of dot at the bottom of your screen hooks is the tangible way in which the user actually touches the interface and hooks into objects. And so by creating this extra sense of dimensionality, creating this assistant that interacts with this extra sense of dimensionality, you start to get the idea of like this ambient intelligence that is doing these things for you. It's almost like a virtual desk, or like if you like Harry Potter, sort of Hermione Granger's like purse, where it's just endless and there's stuff in there, but how do you organize that? And how is the content given to you? And so all of that is done via the assistant in order to help you do things faster, quicker, and in a more ambient way. And so that's great, but it's obviously, there's still more to be done, actually integrating the visuals into those prototypes. But this thesis is taking a long time. I had to figure out this entire system. And so it is definitely ongoing. And in the future, hopefully we can see a more complete prototype that blends both the functionality and the end visuals in. So thanks.